Hello, it's time for another week of What's for Dinner. We have been so blessed this year with our garden. And while some things like these tomatoes are booming, other things like these green beans are coming to an end. We're getting this video started on Sunday, and I'm starting a pot of fresh green beans from our garden, and I'm just putting them in some water with some salt pork. And here are some of the other goodies that we got out of our garden on this Sunday. In this skillet, I am just drizzling some sesame seed oil, and I'm going to add all of that beef that I just sliced up into thin strips into that hot oil. I'm making sweet chili beef, and I'll be adding some odds and ends from our garden. First, I'm going to season this meat with some garlic powder and some onion powder, as well as some salt and some pepper. And just for the fun of it, I'm going to use a little bit of steak seasoning. Next, I'm going to add some liquid aminos, or you could use some soy sauce if that's what you have on hand. And I'm just going to stir this all up and work on getting all of that beef cooked through. The next thing I'm doing is trimming up and cutting these Brussels sprouts. I cooked these Brussels sprouts by themselves in some boiling water before I added them to the rest of the pot with the other ingredients, just because they are a little harder and would take a little bit longer to cook. I'm also going to cut this bell pepper into strips. I had one bell pepper on hand, so that's what I'm using. I'm also dicing up half of this zucchini from our garden. I will freeze the other half, and I decided to use the zucchini diced so that my kids would be less likely to be able to identify it and pick it out. So just a little mom trick there. Is it a potato? Is it zucchini? I don't know. My hope was that they would just eat it. So now I have the bell pepper, the zucchini, and the meat all mixed together. I would have added onion to this pan as well if I had any, but I didn't. So I used onion powder instead. And next I am just chopping up these chili peppers. They also came out of our garden, and I had them hanging up to dry, and these were super hot. Just saying. On the back burner, those Brussels sprouts are softened up, and I'm just going to move them over into the pot with everything else so that when I get the sauce made for this dish, everything will have a chance to soak up all of those flavors. I just turned it down to simmer and put a lid on just to give it all a chance to cook together. In my rice cooker, I'm just making some white rice, and instead of using water, I am using beef broth. So I just have that in there doing its thing. Now that all the veggies have been in the pan for a little while, getting the opportunity to get acquainted, I'm now adding a tablespoon of brown sugar. And sorry, there's a lot of lids on, lids off with this recipe. I don't know why. I was doing other things, so I just kept covering it and then coming back to do what I needed to do to it. So I'm just stirring in all of that brown sugar and making sure that those Brussels sprouts are nice and soft. I decided to use the remainder of that beef broth and just pour it right on in. I have some cornstarch and water that I just mixed up in a separate bowl and just poured that in there too so that it can all get nice and thick. So the rice is done. Made a mess, but that's all right. It cleaned up pretty easy. Those yummy green beans were all cooked down and nice and tender. So I'm just going to throw some of these frozen egg rolls into the air fryer. And it came with like several little sweet and sour packets. And here's Cameron's dish. He was so proud of his plate this night. He said it looked like a regular person's plate. He didn't pick anything out. And so he was pretty proud of himself. So we used his plate for the end picture tonight. The next meal is Monday, and I swear if there isn't just something going on every week. This week was a week of chronic migraines. So on this Monday, I wasn't feeling much like cooking, so I was so glad that I had this easy meal put up for just an occasion. I just ended up making some country fried steak that was frozen from Sam's Club, some instant mashed potatoes, and some frozen corn. I also whipped up a couple pouches of peppered gravy to go on those chicken fried steak and mashed potatoes, and that was it. This wasn't a wonderful meal, but it wasn't a terrible meal either, but everyone seemed to like it. There were no complaints. Tuesdays aren't usually our breakfast for dinner night, but it was this week. Just because it was my night to work late and everyone else had something to do pretty late into the evening, and so we all met up about the same time and ate a pretty late dinner. So I just whipped up some eggs and some sausage, and everybody just kind of made their own meal. Some people had toast and eggs and sausage, and then some of us made bagel sandwiches. And this is just a classic example of as long as you get fed, it doesn't really matter what it was. This was just kind of one of those fend for yourself kind of nights, and we just ended up having eggs and sausage. And I just made a sandwich out of mine by putting some cheese and some mayo on a bagel, and then my egg that I cooked with the yolk cooked hard, and then I sliced up some tomatoes from the garden just to have on the side, and this was breakfast for dinner on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, Bill said that he would like to have fried green tomatoes, and of course, I was still suffering from a headache, so he cooked up some bacon in the skillet, and I agreed to keep it simple, make some burgers, and that I could handle making a few fried green tomatoes. So I got to work getting these green tomatoes cut up into slices, and I got those burgers going in a different skillet. I'm making these pretty fat because this is a fatty pack of ground beef. I do that on purpose when I'm making burgers because I think they have the best flavor, and I know I am crowding these into this pan, but it always turns out just fine. Like I said, there's a lot of fat in this green ground beef, and they're going to shrink down quite a bit, and so I'm just going to get them stuffed into this large skillet and then start seasoning them. And I am using some garlic powder and some salt and pepper. Gonna keep it really simple and just kind of let these start cooking up and leave them alone. Oh, it looks like I also used some onion powder. So you don't want to mess with your burgers too much. You don't want to flip them too much. You don't want to flatten them. You want to keep all those juices locked right inside. And like I said, these burgers turned out delicious, just like I knew they would. I've been making burgers like this for many, many years, and they always turn out fine. So to the skillet, which had the bacon grease in it, I'm also adding some avocado oil. And then in another bowl, I'm adding some cornmeal. And I'm going to add some all-purpose flour. I just do equal amounts of each in one bowl and then just mix that up. In my other bowl, I have some eggs, and I will add some milk to that and then just get those beaten up so that I can dredge my green tomatoes into the egg and milk mixture and then into the flour and cornmeal mixture before putting them in that hot oil. And I like to use enough oil so that it comes up on the sides and gets them cooked up really nice and crispy. Be sure to keep one hand clean at all times. You don't want them both to look like this. Now these burgers are ready to flip, and they are the perfect size. They are the perfect crispiness on the other side and getting cooked through just nicely. And I will be adding some hot habanero and pepper jack cheese. Okay, hot jalapeno and habanero cheese. There we go, got it right. And here's what that looks like when it's done. And here I am getting my burger built with that ooey gooey cheese just running off of the edges. That looks so good. And then I just topped it with one of those fried green tomatoes and some of that crispy bacon. I have some mayonnaise on my bun, and we're gonna keep it really, really simple and just have chips and dip on the side. If you like fried green tomatoes and you get a chance to have one on a burger, I highly suggest that you do so. On Thursday, I just made dinner out of what I could find in our fridge and freezer. I just used some of these frozen tortellinis. I have 2 different kinds, some ground beef, some chopped onion, some salt and pepper, and some of this brown gravy mix, and I'm just stirring that right into my cooked meat. I did not even drain the grease off because I figured, hey, this is gravy and you make gravy out of grease, right? So I just mixed that all up and then added some cooked tortellini into the same pot as the beef and the onion and the gravy mix. Gave it a stir and got that all mixed together, and then I'm just going to add a couple cans of cream of mushroom soup and then mix that all together and let it all heat up and get nice and runny. I do use some milk to thin out that soup and gravy, and then that is just dinner, and we had some bread and butter to go with it. And that was all I did for dinner on that night. I just wasn't feeling that well. I was still having headaches and figured this was good enough, and everyone seemed to like it pretty good. We did use extra Parmesan cheese to top this dish with as well. On Friday, I was completely exhausted. It was such a rough week, not knowing if I was going to have a migraine or not, and most days I did. So Bill made tacos for dinner, and that was really great of him considering he had to go to the store and buy every single ingredient except for the tomatoes and the peppers for this meal. But I also had a Zoom meeting after work, and so he got everything made up. He chopped up all of the veggies and heated up the shells and made the meat, and this was what our finished tacos looked like. Easy dinner. Tacos are always a hit at our house. We had everything planned and all of the ingredients bought for dinner at home on Saturday, but decided to go to the balloon festival instead, and we ended up having dinner there from the food trucks. Here are some of the pulled pork sandwiches and tater tots that the guys got, and then of course I had to have my elephant ear. It was so delicious, and then we got a variety of other foods while we were there for dinner. We shopped around in the little country store and picked up some apples, some peaches, caramel apples. Here I'm helping Dawson find the Honeycrisp apples. We saw every variety but the Honeycrisp, and then we finally found them. We also found the bakery where they sell the donuts, so that was a bonus. They have delicious donuts here. And then we all gathered on the grass to watch the hot air balloons get set up and then get ready for their flight.
Open up the window, I'm breathing in the last of September. I can feel the wind blow, and the late summer sky is like a giant ember. Everything is turning into gold. When the autumn leaves are playing chase, it puts a smile up on my face. They leave their branches one by one and whirl around there just for fun. Some are fast
here's a look at some of the things that we brought home with us. It was so fun to see all of the fall stuff that's coming up out at the orchard that they had the balloon fest this year, saying goodbye and hello to fall. Just kind of a fun way to do the changing of the seasons. And that is all that I have this week. If you had fun here today, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you can see all of my future videos and recipes. And I'll see you in the next one.